There it is. We're reading the Gospel of Truth. Probably for 30, 45 minutes, and then I'm going to call it a night. The Gospel of Truth. We did one of these readings last week on Saturday, so if you missed it and you care, it'd probably be good to go back and watch that or read it yourself. The Gospel of Truth. It's a Valentinian Gnostic gospel, supposedly. But it's relatively agreed upon. In case you are watching this later and you do not know, we have a Discord server. The Discord server is free. There's a link to it pinned in the live chat and in the description of the video. We do a number of live streams every week. You can see when and where they are from the events tab in Discord. Seems to be that we're going to be running 4 of these a week, potentially. Even if Saturday is just me mostly reading to myself. On Tuesday, we do a topic discussion that is voted upon in Discord. Whatever wins the poll is what we talk about. So we did Marcion last week, the original New Testament, maybe. The week before we did Gnosticism. And then this coming Tuesday, we're going to go into the Gospels, the historicity of them, authorship, reliability, things like that. Sources they used, all that fun stuff. That's the plan for Tuesday. And then all the other stuff, the Bible studies are on at Live Bible Study. Tonight, also Saturday, we are going to do a brief game night. And then moving forward, it will be Friday night when we have enough people. So tonight we will do game night Tampa if you're interested. It'll be right after this. So as soon as we shut down, we'll start that. It does have to be somewhat brief, but we'll get a little bit in. And then starting next week, I updated the events on the Discord. So now it will show on Fridays for game night, because it seems like that'll work with people's schedules a little bit better. So that's the plan. The Gospel of Truth. There's no way we read that much. 57 pages. Oh no, never mind. That's not true. We're an hour about into the text. The Father restores deficiency with fullness. This message pertains to the gospel proclamation of the restoration of completeness to those who eagerly await redemption from a higher power. When their optimistic expectation, which reflects the brightness without darkness, is fulfilled, then the culmination is imminent. Nevertheless, the lack present in matter is not caused by the infinite nature of the Father. That's a very interesting sentence. Nevertheless, the lack present in nature is not caused by the infinite nature of the Father, who has allowed for the existence of imperfection throughout time. It is erroneous to propose that the incorruptible one will appear in such a way. The Father has great depth, and the concept of wrong does not exist inside of him. That is a very Gnostic belief. It's also a Christian belief. I just feel like they describe it better sometimes. It is an issue of lineage and of being immediately raised erect upon the arrival of the person who has come to collect. This process of recovering something is referred to as repentance. Therefore, incorruption has extended its influence. The entity pursued the one who had descended, with the intention of providing solace. The light necessities what remains in the absence, representing completeness, similar to how a doctor promptly attends to a sick individual due to their inclination to provide medical care. The affected person also seeks assistance without concealing themselves, since the doctor has the expertise and resources that the patient lacks. It's an interesting analogy. Thus, the state of lacking is remedied by plenty, which has everything that is needed and is provided to fill the emptiness, enabling the person to obtain divine favor. In a condition of inadequacy, this individual was devoid of elegance. Consequently, a decrease took place in the absence of grace. Upon the restoration of the decreased component, the person in question manifested themselves as whole and whole. This is the revelation of an immutable truth that has illuminated the person. That's a very interesting wording. This text has very interesting ways of saying things. The revelation of an immutable truth that has illuminated the person. They were different, that's for sure. Ruth, Patricia. Anointing the chosen with the Father's mercy. Patricia, I heard through the grapevine that you became available for the games this evening. So we will do that right after this. I just cannot stay on for too long. And then moving forward, we'll do, you're not wrong about that. Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? Moving forward, though, we will do game night on Friday. When enough people want to play, we'll do game night on Friday. That seems to be what would work best. Anointing the chosen with the Father's mercy. The reason why people who were distressed spoke about Christ among themselves was to get healing and to be blessed with the Father's merciful atonement. I read that totally weird. Was to get healing and to be blessed with the Father's merciful ointment. The ointment symbolizes the benevolence of the Father who graciously bestows his kindness upon them. However, those whom he has anointed are those who have achieved a degree of perfection. Sealed containers are often covered with wax, and if this coating becomes destroyed, the vessel may begin to leak. The lack of covering is the reason for its imperfection. At that juncture, the occurrence of a strong gust of wind might result in the process of evaporation. Nevertheless, the flawless vessel remains intact, with no seals being tampered with or any leakage occurring. The ideal father compensates for any deficiencies. The Father is kind and generous. He acknowledges his creations as he has intentionally placed them in his own heavenly garden. His paradise is the location where he finds repose. Hey, L. Joe, off-topic question. You posted an X response where you said, not a Protestant. Can you expound on this? Well, we don't want that. Maybe later or in Discord, how do you identify? I feel like you can't ask that question anymore without it carrying much cultural weight. I go follower of Christ. Yeah, it's complicated. It's the honest answer. It's complicated. But I would be called a heretic by any version of Protestantism, of which there are many, which is the crux of my problem. I don't know. If you follow me on X, you should be able to gather it relatively quickly. Yeah, like a Christian heretic, I guess. We identify as Christ heretics. I mean, it's pretty accurate, actually. The funny thing is like, the word heretic is not inherently a bad word. The meaning of it isn't inherently a bad thing. It's one of those, I'm a house cat myself. Hold on. Let me get it here. So it's a person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. So I feel like we've really demonized the term heretic, but it's just a word that means a thing. Like, I'll open Discord. I totally forgot. I'm all off kilter because it's Saturday and I'm not used to this. Gospel of truth. All right, Discord's open if anybody wants to go in. But whoop. Oh God, what did I just do? What is happening here? Okay. Heretic. A person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. And I like that they have both, because the other more modern way to define it would be a person believing in or practicing religious heresy. But heresy just being something that is odds with what is generally accepted. I would say that we are heretics today. And ironically, a lot of those same beliefs made a lot of early Christians heretics, because it just wasn't the most popular belief. So if the most popular belief, if you didn't align with that, you were by definition a heretic, but it's not a bad thing. Heretic was later made into a bad thing because of the early church fathers like Irenaeus and Tertullian and all these guys who would write commentary on people like the Gnostics, like what we're reading tonight. They'd write commentary on these guys and assessments of what they believed, and they would just demonize the absolute hell out of it, calling them heretics. And that's why, like, throughout, we talked about it a bit, but that's why throughout the first, second, third, fourth, beyond those centuries, we see Gnostic and heretic become the same term, like being used interchangeably, when it kind of makes sense, but not really. Not in the way that they're using it, but it literally makes sense. So all that to say, yeah, I'm a heretic for sure. In that, I don't agree with what the normal Christian culture teaches, because it is just like majority lies, built upon lies, built upon lies. You posted it on YouTube just looking for clarification. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really identify with anything. If you put a gun to my head, I would say I have no idea. I don't think what I am is a thing. And I don't think that's because I'm special. I think it's because I've deconstructed so many of my beliefs. I have no idea what I would begin to like. I don't think there is anything to identify with today. I don't think there's a church of what I believe out there that I could go to. Go said at odds, opposing, adversarial, etc. means nothing without context, right? Dudes, we heterox. Not mainstream, but not exactly wrong. Just not mainstream. I think we're just honest is the word I like. We're honest. Even when that means no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. What I won't do is pretend like I know. I won't pretend like I understand the thing. The only thing, I've said it 1,000 times, but the only thing I learned through years of seminary was that I know absolutely nothing, and that I probably won't ever. Most things will remain a mystery unto death. That is the biggest thing that I took away from a lot of years learning all this stuff. Origen the Confessor sent me. I really like what you did there. A lot. Mad respect to you. Big time. That was a early Christian history joke, and I am freaking here for it. That was very well done. I just want to be good. That's my denomination. Yeah, I just want to be honest. That's my denomination. That's a good way to put it. I just want to be thing. That is my denomination. For real. Just love the best I can and improve the best I can with Christ as the model, right? And I think that's what he is. He's the model. I think that much is apparent. I think that much is agreed upon. L, if you can make it to Tuesday, I'd be curious how you view what we talk about on Tuesday night, because that's going to be a good one. Oh, this comment's going to cut off for you guys, but the etymology of heresy isn't quite relative for what Jesus meant. Heretics are false preachers, prophets. No, that's poor translation. Just no. Sounds blasphemous anyways. Why don't you identify with Protestantism? Because I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong just like the Catholics are wrong and just like the Orthodox are wrong. I don't think any surviving anything exists that has the absolute truth of how things were or how they should be. I think, sadly, the early church destroyed and demonized everything that was there other than what they pushed. And I don't think that was divine intervention, because I don't believe that's what we see in the history. We see a power struggle. We see a rhetoric war. We see demonization. And not for good reason, but because it didn't agree with them. And the irony is that that's what we do today. The rhetoric war that existed in the first couple centuries is no different than the rhetoric war that exists today between the Protestants and the Catholics. It just looks different, and it's mostly held on Twitter. But the concept, the foundation of it is the same. We're right, you're not Christians. No, we're right, and you're not Christians. And that is exactly what happened back then. That was the proto-Orthodox with the Gnostics, and with others, but the Gnostics are probably the most famous and happen to align with what we're reading tonight. But it's the same thing. Proto-Orthodox versus Gnostics. And it's the victor writes the history book situation. So whoever wins that war, well, history will show that they were right. just like what's going on right now between Protestants and Catholics, and now the Orthodox are kind of in it too, but between the Protestants, the Catholics, and the Orthodox, whoever wins this rhetoric war and becomes more predominant in 200 years, 300, 500 years, they will have rewritten the history, and no one will really know what actually happened, outside of maybe technology, because we're able to document things better. But whoever wins the war is what will be true. But that doesn't mean any of it was true. It just means they won. They were louder. They got more people to buy into their side. It's a war of rhetoric, and that's what I believe happened. So I don't think we have the surviving documents that I would require to have a very firm stance on anything. Because L, protesting without context doesn't mean anything. Protesting against what? I like that. I didn't even think of it from that perspective, but that's well said. Yeah, if Protestantism is girl, if Protestantism can't survive without the five solas die, then Protestantism equals dead. Girl, I'm having a hard time talking tonight. The truth is usually quiet, in my experience. That's gold. That needs to be screenshot, put on a canvas, made into a bumper sticker. That's a wildly insightful, very brief comment of absolute reality. The truth is usually quiet, in my experience. Right. That's I think that's exactly what happened. I suppose I'm Protestant against anyone who thinks they hold the complete truth pertaining to God and condemn others for not holding their views. I'm an adversary to those people. Right. I haven't posted it yet, but I did a video today on the Q document. So like the supposed scholarly sources that predominantly Matthew and Luke probably used. Like most people have heard that Matthew and Luke use Mark as a reference, as a source material for their own gospel. John is kind of a totally separate thing. But of the synoptics, Mark was first. Then you have Matthew and Luke. Matthew and Luke probably used Mark as a reference. Well, there's also the Q document, which is a hypothetical document that we believe exists based on textual evidence. And then the M and the L document. So I recorded that today. I'll get it up sometime in the next couple of days. But that's interesting too. And I feel like the more, like, it's a long way answer your question, L. The more you really get into this stuff, like the scholarly side of things, the history of the documents that we see as inerrant and God-breathed, the more you really learn about what it is we hold in that Bible, it doesn't affect belief. It shouldn't. But it should affect the way we view the documents. Not that they're invalid, not that they're not to be taken seriously, just that they are what they are. And so outside of living in delusion, there are realities of the text that like you have to grapple with as a consciously thinking person. So when I post that, if you had never heard it before, it's pretty eye-opening. And I think it will help you kind of understand why I, and probably most people in our little group here, like refuse to identify with something specifically. And then Tuesday will be really good because we're going to go into the Gospels hardcore. The video I did, it was just mostly on the Q Gospel, the M and the L Gospel. It's David, the Fed. How did that even start? I don't even know how that started. Feds are here. Modern church denominations are like blind people holding seminars on color theory. It really is. It really is. My favorite thing for Twitter is that I have access to priests and pastors. And I've only really started using Twitter again like the past month or so, I guess, like actually using it. And the stuff you hear is just insane. The level, and I'm like I'm relatively educated on like Christian stuff, history, theology, but nowhere near like super smart people, super educated people. And it's mind-boggling to see the men who are leading congregations and just like where their level of education is. And it's not like to bag on them, but it's just really odd. It's really odd that there's no vetting process of like, okay, if you're going to teach 10,000 people or 1,000 or 100 people or 10 people, if you're going to teach 10 people about something that is life or death, literally, for the soul, we are going to test and make sure you know some stuff. And there's just none of that. There's just none of it at all. But worse than that is the guys who get pigeonholed into just believing the one thing. It's beautiful to be able to sit back and say, during the Protestant Reformation and before, I see what the Catholics were doing that was good. And I see what the Protestants that were doing that was good. They were both trying to do good things. They were both also doing pretty evil, wicked stuff. It's nice to be able to sit on the outside and be like, I see the good and the bad in both of you. Whereas if you talk to a Protestant, it's all good for the Protestants and it's all evil for the Catholics. And that's just not reality. None of them are all good or all bad. It's a pretty even split. And that's just kind of how humanity rolls, I feel like. All L. Love that response. L is pretty fantastic. I love L because I get called out often. And then I have to intelligently try to rework what I said, or they hold me accountable, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I appreciate them for that. Oh, the chat just got super delayed for me. Everything just came in really hard. Can we do a whole Tuesday on beliefs versus truth or something? I don't know how to word that. I don't know exactly what you mean. So if you can figure out how to word it, then, I mean, unless you just mean like, I don't know if we could do that. Everything is basically a belief, right? Anything within Christianity is a belief. There's very little truth at all. People say the truth is the Bible. Okay, well, now let's tear down the validity of the Bible. How did we get it? What's the actual evidence that we have the documents that we're supposed to have? It all boils down to belief, in my opinion. So if you can figure out how to word that in a different way, and if it's something we can do, then definitely. Brian O'Connor, if you know, you know. I don't know. S. Mill, what translation of gospel are you using? To be clear, this is not the canon. S. Mill. This is a Gnostic gospel. And I guess since I see a few names that I don't know, we read things that are not the canon. It does not mean we're vouching for them. It does not mean we think they're inspired. We read all kinds of literature outside of the Bible because a lot of it's from the same time. And so it helps add cultural and historical context to the Bible when we do read the Bible. And we do that on Sunday nights. So just to be clear. But to answer your question, this is the gospel of truth. It is a Valentinian Gnostic gospel. So there's no real translation in the sense that you're asking. You won't be able to look this up like in your Bible because it is not there. It is non-canonical. Good God. Who or what do you think the Antichrist is? I'm going to leave that one and let Ghost or someone else take care of that. That one's not for me. Johnny said, my doctrine started at 5 years old. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, till 15. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you care to elaborate. A counterfeit Christ with most of Christ's characteristics. That's a very elegant way to answer the question that had immediately overwhelmed me. I just read Geoffrey. I just read a church father that worst sin was schism against the apostolic church. Who'd you read? A handful of them talked about that kind of stuff. The funny part about it is, though, that they participated in it. I won't say that for sure, but based on like what we know, I would say it's fair to say most of the church fathers participated in the division. So I'd be curious to see or hear who you're actually talking about. What is truth? Right. Oh, Fast and Furious. No, I did not catch that at all. My translation is the same one that inspired the essence. The teacher teaches it yesterday and forever. I'm still lost. I feel like you're trying to be sly, but I'm not quite catching the slyness. It had to be translated from Coptic by someone. Yeah, sure. So are you asking for the author of the text? Because I can get you that. Hold on. Because I believe they translated it themselves. Getting it here. Hold on. So you know what we can do. 58. Feel like this was actually in the introduction somewhere. But maybe I'm thinking of the other book we're reading.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Do you think the notes on those translations and would be available?
What do you mean?
I mean, like, how did he arrive at the translation? Like, do you know if there are any notes on it,
Oh,
or is it
no.
just
No. I
okay?
mean, I doubt it. I doubt it. There could be, but I doubt it. I'd say maybe 10% of the time, do people like give a commentary along the way and be like, I chose to translate this to this, but these are other potential possibilities. But based on context, I chose this translation. I rarely see that ever, if that's what you're
Because
asking.
that's what we need.
That's what we need. Yeah, it's almost impossible to get it, unfortunately. Even with like ours, even with the canon, which gets translated so many freaking times, I rarely see it for that. But every once in a while, it's just not common. And I feel like that kind of adds validity to what we were talking about. Like it's personal bias. These people decide to translate it a certain way, usually because it kind of fits their model of how they already perceive the text. In my opinion, obviously, but and I think that's why they don't even want to consider a different translation. And from what I've seen, and it's unfortunate, but the guys who give the most possibilities and the most open and honest translation are secular New Testament scholars. The guys who are literally not Christian. They'll kind of do it objectively, which in a sense makes sense, but it's also wildly depressing.
Yeah, I'd say we need them. We need those people.
But they're great. They're fantastic. I have learned probably close to as much from atheist New Testament scholars than I have from Christian guys. And it's interesting to see the blatant bias when you study something and use an atheist as a source first and then go to a Christian. The bias is just, it's so loud. But yeah, thank God we have guys who have no dog in the fight who are also doing all this work for sure. The
Yeah, we couldn't build an aggregate without all kinds of different ideas and theories and translators and everything.
I can't
So,
even imagine. I can't even imagine how depressing it would be. S Mill. I just put the author of this compilation. So this what we're reading out of right now is the Gnostic Gospels master collection, the rejected Gospels of, and then it goes on to list a bunch of them. I gave you the author in there though, so because I don't want to take up too much of our time right now live, I'm not going to dig through the introduction, but I'm almost certain they had the means of translation in the introduction somewhere. So if you would like to look, go ahead and look. But I don't want to say because I don't remember off the top of my head. We were on, I think, 58. Yeah. These beetles, man, are breeding. Die, it's winter. The essence were a Jewish sect. But how does it relate to your earlier comment? Layman said, my understanding is that the Antichrist is a spirit or attitude that people have, and our system will allow for the Antichrist driven people to elect a particular representative to lead them, hence the in the Antichrist. I have almost no opinion on the Antichrist. I am a cynic about the whole thing. I think this world will burn forever in its negativity and terrible culture. That's fair. An Aramaic speaker, Greek, and a Hebrew walk into a bar. Oh, God. Oh, the Essenes. Is that what you were saying the whole time and I was just completely butchering it, reading it as Essence? Yeah, you were. Well, that's embarrassing. I'm glad we're on the same page now, though. I still don't get your first comment, though. But now I am at least with you in the same book. Joe, have you seen why John Dominic Crossan says about the virgin birth? No, I have not. So if you have something, I would love to see it. If you want to throw it at me in Discord. I'm totally down for that. I assume you're saying that because of the thing that I did. So anybody who hasn't seen it, I'd recommend watching this thing I posted a couple days ago on the Tattoo Theist YouTube channel on the virgin birth. And it's interesting. I don't believe it. I'm just saying it's interesting. I could see why it would make sense. I would in no way be surprised if this were a valid explanation for the virgin birth. And it's not in any way a full expose. I'm trying to keep these things as short as humanly possible. But the virgin birth is an interesting one. And it's one of the doctrines that I'm dramatically and quickly shifting on in real time currently. Wow, 9 likes already, 19 watching. We made it to the big show. Just need 10 more likes. David, I swear to God, one day, man, one day, somebody will make us rich and you will be paid for marketing. Yeah, I don't love Revelation, but I accept it. I do not accept it. I will continue to be the biggest heretic in the room. I do not accept it. Don't like it. Don't like what it says. Don't think it makes sense with a lot of things. Seems like a lot of mumbo jumbo. But I would make this trade. I will grant you Revelation in our Bible if you also add Enoch. Just that one trade. I have many more requests for trades, but that's one that I would make in a heartbeat. Throw Enoch in there, and Revelation can stay. I think virgin has more theological implications than biological ones. The one that gets me, man, is just that Isaiah is talking in the present tense. That's the thing that gets me. If you don't require Isaiah for the virgin birth, then fine. And then I still have arguments, but I have less arguments. If we're using Isaiah as the prophecy, Isaiah 7 is the prophecy, then I think we just have nothing to stand on. Like it just seems like a normal, in the moment conversation where God is going to provide a sign for the king. I have struggles with it. But I definitely see that it could be entirely theological and in no way biological. I could see that. But I definitely don't have a developed opinion regarding that. David, there was a whole conversation about you that you didn't even get to be a part of. I don't think Q is right because Paul was so focused on the crucifixion over sayings. So any saying gospel also had the crucifixion. Why do those two things have to... I don't get what you're saying at all. I don't think Q is right because Paul was so focused on the crucifixion over sayings. Please explain more before I respond. On it, but as it is there, I totally disagree. In every possible way, I disagree. But I totally agree with you on this one. Also, virgin just meant unmarried girl. So I guess, to be fair, in what context? And in what language? The word in Hebrew that we used is for like maiden or young woman. I don't believe it meant unmarried. From what I understand, it's maiden or young woman, but was sometimes used to describe a virgin because many young women are unmarried. Many young women are virgins. But the Hebrew language also has a specific word for virgin, Bethula, and that word is not used in Isaiah. In Greek...
Sorry, I pulled my headphone out when you said what the meaning was for virgin.
So
Can you
in
repeat that?
yeah, in Isaiah, when we're the verse that is quoted in the Gospels about the virgin birth out of Isaiah, the Hebrew word that is used does not mean virgin. It means young woman, or is often used as like maiden.
Oh. Oh.
But to be fair, they sometimes use it to describe a virgin because many young women, which is what the word means, are
Yeah.
virgins. But the problem
That
for
makes sense.
me is that they have a specific word for virgin, which is a different word, which was not used. So if she was a virgin, and that's who Isaiah was
Okay.
describing, why not use the term virgin? Why
Right.
leave it
So that's
open?
the argument.
That's the argument. That's the
That's
argument. And
troubling.
that's what I go into in that virgin birth video. So anybody who's
Oh,
interested in that, I go through that, the Greek translation, all that stuff, because, and again, I'm not like pushing it. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to look at. It's an,
a video that you made, or where is this video?
yeah,
Sorry, let me look a little bit.
on the Tattooed Theist YouTube.
Okay.
It's the virgin birth mistranslation. I'll put it in the Discord thing right here. In the Discord chat right
That's
there.
interesting.
It is. It's interesting. And that's all it is. And it doesn't need to be more than that. It's just interesting. Johnny said, I love the Book
But
of
it makes
Enoch.
you question it, though. Sorry. It makes you question if it was a virgin.
Right.
Which is important.
But yeah, but that's something like in the video I kind of go into too, is like, but is it? Is it though?
Yeah, but it's like, so it's made so it's such a big thing, like with
Right.
Mary, and
Right.
especially in the Catholic Church.
Right. Yeah, big time. Yeah, I would argue like for Catholics, it's required. You have to have the virgin birth. Otherwise, like your entire faith crumbles. And on its face, I think for like every Christian, you're like, wait, if that's not true, nothing is true. But if you actually sit and think about it,
it's a miracle that proves that he's God somehow.
Right. Which is a conversation I was having with some people. So I'm like, even Kat and I were having a conversation. I was like, okay, take away the virgin birth, leave the resurrection, and take away every other miracle Jesus ever did. But if he died and then rose from the dead, taught a bunch of people, saw a bunch of people, went to hell and back, would it shake your faith if like that's all he did? Not, but no. Or say you take away the virgin birth and you keep all of the miracles and you keep the resurrection. Like that's enough for me. The virgin birth for me is not required. And it was just like, it was common in a lot of these ancient religions. You, as like a god, as a deity, you kind of weren't taken serious if there wasn't a virgin birth as a part of the story. So for me, if I found out that Christianity adopted that, like they do many other things, it wouldn't surprise me, personally.
Damn.
But I'm a heretic, so everyone needs to be careful.
Like, wow, so there could have been some sort of political
definitely possible
agenda behind it.
It's definitely possible. It could also, like the video, the approach I took was like a very specific perspective, which is more or less it was an accident. There was a mistranslation from Hebrew to Greek, which I think is also, it's fair. It's potential. It makes sense. Layman just blasted us with stuff though. I'm behind in the chat, everyone, so I'm sorry too. I did not expect all this. I, again, tonight expected to read mostly to myself or maybe one other person. So the virgin birth could be related to the curse for the woman in Genesis 3 that speaks of pain and childbirth. There is an interpretation that the turmoil is not about physical pain, but about anxiety regarding reproduction and fertility, because families depended so much back then on children for farming and future family security. So reproduction rates might have been naturally low. Was there a third one? Yeah, okay. But Mary could have had her first child on the first try, which is kind of rare. Up until that point, she would have been a virgin. Then they did. Then she was pregnant, first try. I have heard something similar to this before. It doesn't fully satisfy me, but I get, like, I understand it, and I think it's a reasonable theory to try to explain what's going on. For me, it's too many hoops. I feel like it defies Occam's razor. But maybe I'm just being a cynic. Q is said to be just a sayings gospel, no crucifixion or miracles. Yes. Okay. I'm more with you now, but I don't see why, unless I misunderstood your first one. You said, I don't think Q is right because Paul was so focused on the crucifixion. Why does Q and Paul have to be related at all? Or are you saying you don't think Q is Paul? Because I don't think Q is Paul. If you isolate it like this, even if you just say, like, Q was only used by Matthew and Luke, why does Paul have to have anything to do with Q at all? I guess is more clearly stated what my question is. Ruth said it had to be a virgin birth. If Jesus had a human father, then he would not have been born sinless. Right, but we're presupposing a lot of things already. I don't disagree. Again, like, I'm playing constant devil's advocate. If I were to argue that, I would say, like, we're presupposing that God can't decide through humans to make himself sinless on earth. Like, God himself requires, when making himself, for the woman to be a virgin. As if, like, that's not something he could just bypass. I get what you're saying. It's a common argument. And again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. But we have to presuppose the whole sin factor. So if we remove the sin factor, then would there still be an argument, or would that kind of take it away for you? I'm not smart enough to comment, but during a downtime in my life, I sold used cars very successfully, so I know how to ask for likes. I love you, David. You're the man. Yeah, in the Semitic language I speak, those are not interchangeable unless your daughter, minor, unmarried, and undefiled. I didn't know you spoke Semitic languages, or a Semitic language. I'm learning new things. So I want to make sure I have this right. They're not interchangeable. Okay. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that the word that we see used in Hebrew for virgin shouldn't have been used in any other context. If I'm understanding correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. Layman said, and Jesus is the firstborn, which has other theological significance. Right. But does that require the virgin birth? Or are you saying that is like a totally new or additional factor? And does it? Does it, though? Bacon bites for confetti? Thorn, what's going on, my man? What does FAFO mean? I'm not up to speed on internet jargon and lingo. Somebody has to help me. What is FAFO? Ruth said, Jesus, these beetles are driving me banana sandwich. Jesus had to be a perfect sacrifice. Sin curse comes from the man, not woman. Therefore, Jesus had to be born without a human father. I require further explanation of that. Sin curse comes from the man, not woman. Therefore, Jesus had to be born without a human father. I guess one, can sin curse coming from a man and not a woman? Explain. And two, God could not bypass that, is what we're presupposing. God could not bypass that. Again, devil's advocate. Go said, some words come with a zip file of... Actually, let me try to fix this real quick. Whoops. Does that work? Dang it, it's not going to work. You guys are typing too much text. Some words come with a zip file of characteristics. Maiden or unmarried comes with virgin implications, just like a dog or cat comes with their own implications, like furry, four-legged, etc. In some, yeah. I mean, I agree for the most part. I don't agree in all textual contexts, but for the most part.
Did we talk about when it says virgin in the Gospels? Like, what's the word?
Well, so then we're talking about Greek. So it becomes kind of a different, we have to completely reset the conversation. at least from like what we were talking about earlier, we were specifically talking about the Hebrew, and then the translation through the Septuagint, which would be the Greek version of, like, because you have to consider like these gospel writers are Greek speaking, Greek writing, so they don't read Hebrew, so they already have a translation that they're reading from, and that would be the Septuagint, which is a translated version of the Hebrew Bible. So you're already one translation deep, and then from there it obviously branches out. But if they translated it to begin with wrong, and I'm not saying they did, but if they did, then everything they write about is wrong moving forward.
Right.
So whatever term they use at that point for virgin is kind of irrelevant. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like if the Isaiah verse is like a prophecy, then it's kind of like we're going off that.
Right. So it ends up being exactly, yeah. And that would be the case for any of them. Like if any of the prophecies we just translated it wrong, but then wrote 10 books about it, that would immediately render everything about that prophecy irrelevant because it was wrong at the base. Yeah. But I'm not saying that's what it was. I don't want to like get anybody all twisted, but
you never know.
You never know. And if nothing else, like it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting just like the other one that I went through recently, which was like the 1 Corinthians stuff, which 9 days ago I put on YouTube, talking about if you move, some of the early manuscripts had these 2 verses in a different order, and it has to do with women being silent in the church. I think it's 800 manuscripts had it the way that we read it. 5 manuscripts, super old ones, had those 2 verses in a different place. And then it said that Marcion had the 2 verses in an even more different place. And it changes the context entirely, going from telling women to shut up in church to telling women to not speak in tongues, which are like 2 very different things. That was another interesting one. Not to say it's true, not to say that we have the wrong order of the verses, but just that it's interesting, because it is. I think the crucifixion was so popular by the 50s, so it was around from earlier and central. So I think it would have shown up in any pre-gospel. I'm still not fully grasping the connection with Q. I guess this is a good time. Any of y'all who we don't know well, we have a Discord group, and specifically S-Mill. I would like to talk about this with you because I want to understand what you're saying, because I feel like we're just talking past each other. There's a link to the Discord pinned at the top of the live chat and in the description of the video. It's free. It will always be free. It's just where we all hang out and talk about this kind of stuff. We also do a number of these live streams every week. So next one is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. That's the canon. So we're reading Job. Tuesday, we're doing a topic discussion where this Tuesday, we're going to be going into the history of the Gospels, historicity, authorship, relevance to a degree, sources, some of the stuff that we're talking about here. And then Thursday, we're reading out of the Apocrypha. But if you're into this kind of thing, I recommend you come join us. And S-Mill, I really want to get to the bottom of what you're trying to say, because I feel like you obviously know some stuff because you're saying things that resonate. So I'm not sure if we're just miscommunicating, but I don't see why Q and Paul have anything to do with each other or have to. That was so connected to my previous 3 parts. My bad. Part 4, Jesus firstborn. Okay, I'm with you now. I appreciate you throwing that out there. It's an interesting, like, it's a good theory. I get it. It makes sense. I don't hate it like I do some of the other ones. I just don't fully drive with it. But I totally get it. Ruth.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah, I knew you were there. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to further talk about the virgin birth, because when I was questioning things, it was explained to me that like the original sin, I mean, it was Eve that ate the apple first, whether we believe this was real or not, or just like whatever. But anyways, it was Adam who was over her, and he could have said, no, Eve, we're not supposed to do that. And so the responsibility was on Adam, the man who is over Eve and God being over Adam. And so the sin is visited down, the sin curse is visited down through the man. And that's how it was explained to me that Mary had to be a virgin for Christ to be sinless, because if Christ was born from a man, he couldn't have been the perfect sacrifice on the cross. All of our sins couldn't have been transmuted onto Christ if he wasn't a perfect sacrifice, so to speak. So
So
that's how it was explained to me, and it made sense to me. And so I believe that.
I, so
You know,
outside of like, I get the logical argument for it, but like outside of that, how would you, like, say you were trying to get somebody to buy into that perspective, how would you do it if it were you? Like, you make me believe that that is what happened. What would you use, I guess, is what I'm asking. Besides what you already said.
I guess, what, you know, like the Hebrews had to have a perfect lamb, no spots, no blemishes, no disease. It had to be perfect. Had to be a perfect sacrifice. And then Christ was the final, last. Like, he took away everybody's sin, past, future, and present. It's like, it's not a sin issue. It's a like a heart believing in Christ issue. And are you an ambassador of Christ or not? And because I was like indoctrinated my whole life of being afraid of going to hell. And when I joined this Bible study with this church I go to right now, I through Bible study, I learned that what I grew up believing and fearing wasn't true, that I wasn't going to go to hell for my sins. It was going to be for my unbelief and rejection of God. And
Right.
and I know that that's not popular with, like, say, the Wesleyan Church, but they believed once they were saved, they were perfect and sinless, which they aren't. And so it really made sense to me, though, if I was trying to convince somebody, like, I guess they would have to have some knowledge of the background of Hebrew sacrifices and know that it would have to be perfect. And so you'd probably have to go down a rabbit hole with someone to convince them that, you know, that sin is visited the offspring through the father. Like, you know, I guess you might want to call it, you can't see it, it's like spiritually, you know. So I guess, you know, I guess I'm repeating myself when I say that, you know, Adam was basically that was where sin started, and it was through the man, not the woman, because he should have took responsibility. And because I had heard that Eve was like, like, women can pass down sin, but it was just Adam. So I don't know, is that true? I don't know, but that's how it was explained to me, and it made sense to me. And so I adhere to that belief.
I mean,
So
I get it, and it's like, it's a common belief. Like, I bet if you were to Google it, it's gonna pop up. I would never tell you whether it's true or not, because I have no idea.
correct,
But
right.
I would
Nobody knows.
right. I would say, though, like, I don't see any argument other than the one you gave, which on its face, like, I'm a proponent of. I'm all about the failures of, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to sound like an asshole, but I don't mean it like that. The failures of women being the failures of the man. I'm a big believer in that, like, super traditional. I think if anything happens with the wife, it started with the guy to some degree. At some point in time, it's his fault because of the leadership model. So I'm huge on that, big believer in it. The fact that, or the idea that sin itself passes directly through and solely through Adam, I get it. I don't see any reason to actually believe it personally, though. I also just find it, like, inconsequential. Why, if anything other than the virgin birth, where, like, that idea would be necessary to make it make sense? Or could it be that that idea was passed through history to make the virgin birth make more sense. Because I can't think of anything else where I'd explain the thing using the concept of original sin was passed through Adam. I can't think of any other doctrine or theology, and I could be wrong, so if anybody else can, call me out. But I can't think of any doctrine or theology where when I was trying to explain it or justify it, I would say, well, because Adam passed on original sin to humanity, and therefore doctrine, theology. The only one is the virgin birth, in which case it sounds kind of like a good, to me, like a cop-out in a sense of, well, that's why. That's why it's important. That's why we have to have it. I just think it's like very, very, and in no way do I mean it offensively, but to me, I see it as kind of like petty. Like, why is that required? Why do you need that? The spotless lamb thing, again, on its face kind of makes sense, but also lambs don't carry sin. So if we're going to connect sin to something that doesn't really make sense in the same and I'm not at all like this isn't towards you, but because I've heard that before. But like animals, that was a totally different thing. Animal sacrifice was a different thing. The requirements for it were a different thing. And it didn't have anything to do with like the sin of the creature. So in our case, if this is about the sin of the creature, I don't see the connection personally. But I see it for sure as a pretty decent way to try to substantiate like the requirement for the doctrine of the virgin birth. I would be interested, I guess, to see, and this is something I haven't done, so maybe I'll do it because now I'm kind of curious. I'd be interested to see where do we have true documentation from like the early church fathers, the first couple centuries, if any, about that idea and what they said. I'd be curious about that. So like if we had documentation from any of the early guys like Origen or Tertullian or any of these guys where they talk about that, then I would probably consider it a bit more. If I had to guess, though, I would guess that was like a view that became popular later in history when we were having to kind of justify, in a sense, or give reasons for the virgin birth. And that's a total speculation, and I have nothing to base it on at all. But that's like my initial take, I guess. But now I'm curious, so I'm gonna see what I can find. Like how far back does that theory go? I hope that makes sense. But I don't hate it. I don't hate it. It makes sense.
It does make sense. It would be a good podcast once you do your research.
For sure.
If anybody else, it'd be neat to go over that.
No, I love it.
I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't necessarily believe in like Christ being the perfect sacrifice in the general way. I know it's a whole thing, but
okay, if you explain,
interesting.
Briefly explain.
It's really hard to explain. I might have to think about it and like type it in the Discord.
That's fine.
Just because it's a main point that caused me to leave church, and it's like just kind of a sensitive point, I guess.
Gotcha.
It's hard to talk about. But if like me believing that, it kind of doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't really connect. The virgin birth doesn't really make any sense in that.
Yeah. So that's a good example. Reasoning. Yeah. If you had that view about Christ, then the virgin birth would be inconsequential. It would make no difference from like I guess how I perceive what you said without hearing the whole explanation. If you're down though, I would like to read it. I get why you wouldn't want to or why it'd be a lot to like say.
I'll think about it and type it out.
Yeah, deal. I'm definitely curious. All right, I'm gonna try to catch up a little. If anybody else has anything to say, though, just rudely interrupt me. Hell is a 7th century word, concept, and belief of the Celtic people of England. I feel like Ghost was going on. Yeah, he was. Most everyone here understands the problem with the word hell. That is true. From there, hell migrated to the Scandinavian countries and was eventually adopted into Christianity in the 10th century. Yeah, we are no stranger to the hell issue. I think a lot of us are on the same page with you, more than likely. But I can't read through all that right now, so maybe not. Maybe I look like an idiot. Esmil said, the word virgin, alma, in Hebrew means a young woman, a maid, or a newly married woman. Okay, well, newly married was new to me. Like I said earlier, I understand it to be a maiden or a young woman. newly married, I suppose, makes sense too. Just like using it in context to express somebody who's virgin. It makes sense because most young women, if not all for the most part, were probably virgins during this period of history that we're talking about. He said, any of these, I assume you're a he, so if you're a girl, I apologize. Any of these would be assumed a literal virgin, but after wedding night, she would not be required for Isaiah. Right. So then you could say that. Two-part is then like, why would if this was to be a prophecy if this was meant to be, like if you believe the Bible was absolutely inspired by God and that this book would be used thousands of years later and that not too long later, we would have the Jesus Christ come and do all his Jesus stuff. If you as the inspired author knew this, or if you as God, who is inspiring the author, knew this, why would you leave any question if the virgin birth was a necessary doctrine? Meaning, if we have a word in Hebrew, Bethula, for virgin, just to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's as the God of the universe, making sure that this extremely important prophecy about who the coming Messiah, the Savior of the entire world would be, why would you not just be a little bit more specific so that when the gospel writers come later, they have as specific information about about the prophecies of the absolute most important character of all of humanity? Why would it just not be specific? That's what gets me. That's the biggest thing that gets me. The second thing, though, is why is Isaiah speaking in the present tense? He's not talking about a woman that will become pregnant in the future because he's trying to calm someone down in the moment. And in the moment, he says there is a woman, a young woman, and if you take pregnancy, fine, but even if you do, there is a young woman who is pregnant, who is currently pregnant, and that will be your sign, crazy king who's freaking out about being decimated. That will be your sign. So if Isaiah is using the virgin lady, the young woman, virgin or not, to calm down the king, if this young woman is to be the sign to calm him down, how would a woman pregnant way in the future calm down the king right now? Contextually, it doesn't make sense. So to me, that's like problem one and problem two. Whether we grant the term virgin or not, either way, for me, it's still contextually problematic. And with all those records of I feel like I can't even catch up on these. With all those records from human hands, we have nothing about Jesus from his supposed time on the planet. I can't read everything you guys wrote, but I really want to respond to that, but I'm not going to because I do not have enough context. S. Mill said Matthew is generally thought to have mistranslated Alma as Anthenos in Greek, which means literal virgin. Right. That's exactly right. I'm with you 100% on that. Which could be a really simple way to express that it was mistranslated. So if the gospel writer of Matthew, because you're absolutely right, Parthenos is what was used. So if he mistranslated Alma, oh, you said that, I apologize. But yeah, so if he mistranslated Alma as Parthenos, then everything moving forward would read in Greek virgin, when potentially based on the theory, he had mistranslated it to begin with. And where that isn't what it should have said. It could very well be. That's the theory, though. Yeah, I go into all that in that video. Where is the Torah that Jesus would have written? Why is Jesus writing Torahs? I feel so lost with whatever ghost and tired of liars. Oh, I like his name, though. Tired of liars. That's how I feel. That's how I feel every day when we talk about a lot of this stuff. Al said, ghost, come on, hell outside of theology, religion, or education is understood globally. Whether it's accepted as reality or truth is another story. I don't know if I agree with that. I'd have to think about that. I think a lot of people don't accept hell as a theory. I think a lot of people see hell as a very silly concept that idiotic religious people have come up with to fear monger people into behaving.
Which is true in one sense, but It's
It's
also
definitely true in one sense. Yeah. It's definitely used for sure. And I feel like it's coming back. That was a big thing in the 80s, 90s. Oh, I guess before too. But like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was all fear mongering, hell. Was it fire and brimstone? And then into the early 2000s, it starts to shift. And now we're in the all grace. You can do terrible things. And as long as you believe in
it's
Jesus,
like one
you're
or the
saved.
other.
It's spectrum to spectrum. That's what culture does. And it's a good proof of like, we know nothing. And we're not functioning on something objective. We're not all functioning on sola scriptura. We're changing it every 15 years. As culture goes spectrum to spectrum, Christian culture goes spectrum to spectrum, which is why it is not to be trusted. Yes, Isaiah 7:14. Yeah. I'm gonna have to rename this video. I read like a page. This is good stuff though. I hope this becomes the future of what we do. I hope we can just eventually go live and it's just a free for all of random stuff. This is fun. This makes you think. The funniest part of the Bible is the Ten Commandments story. The handiwork of God himself was broken in less than a month, and we have human documents that survive from before that. Not much. Not much. And what do you mean? I want to say this first. It sounds like the few things that I've read from you, it sounds like you are an atheist who's not happy with Christianity. And I would just like to say high five. I am probably with you on most things. With that being said, though, like we don't have a lot of human documents from before that. We have very, very, very little from before that time. You're talking like early. It's pretty early. But there are some, for sure. But the Ten Commandments survived. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Unless you mean like the actual tablets. Which, who cares? Like, what relevance does it have, I guess? Unless it's just like on principle for you. Which I guess I get. Like, I respect it. But I don't fully agree with it. Eric Red. Hell is the impossibility to reason like pandemic. We're in it. Hell is the impossibility to reason. That's interestingly said. Is that from something? It sounds kind of familiar. I don't want to rob you of that if that is yours, because that's smart. Plato never wrote anything down either. All we have from Plato is by his followers. So it is like Jesus. Whatever remains, that is actually from him. Yes. And Plato is actually a total rabbit hole in and of itself. There is a large portion of scholarship that is it Plato or Socrates? Actually, now I don't want to say because I don't remember. There's a large portion of scholarship that believes one of them didn't exist at all. I'm not super deep on like philosophical history, so pardon my ignorance. But I remember listening to some of the theologian guys talk about how maybe it was Socrates. Maybe it was Socrates. I don't know if anybody believes Plato didn't exist. Maybe it was Socrates, but they were saying like Socrates was not a real person. People wrote in the name of, but that was not an actual person. But I have no opinion on that whatsoever, just to be super clear, because I have no idea. But yes, good point about Plato. Good point. Your new AI doctor for Sheol. Was that in response to something? Hell is a natural result of ignoring the Ten Commandments. The more we ignore it, the more hell we bring into the physical world. Don't deny the golden rule, baby. God will spontaneously human combust him in time. He is mocking God. Eric, I'm having a hard time following you, my guy. Gotta be honest with you. I'm struggling. Hell is a place you spend your entire eternity minus, hopefully, 80 years if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, says L. A quote from Oliver Stone. Was it Apocalypse Now movie or Platoon? Can't remember now. Okay. Well, thanks for being honest. It sounded kind of familiar. It's a good quote.
I think Eric was talking about AI.
Right, but it was like in reference to something else, and I don't understand where it came from. Because he said, your new AI doctor for Sheol. Okay, well, what the hell does that mean? What was the setup for that? Funny how the law was used to domesticate his creation. I don't like that. I don't think that's a good way to say that at all. I don't think it's a fair way to say it. I mean, I guess in a sense, literally, sure. Sure. If domestication is living in moral union with one another, then I suppose. I think it's kind of a provocative way to express it, though. No one is claiming either of them were a god. So these guys are going too fast, man. Pure blood. It's good to see you. Atheism complains no god. The existence of atheism proves God. Atheism implies belief. Without God, where does an atheist gain footing? First the virgin birth, now it's a oh my god. Oh my god, you can tell I gotta go to bed. Apologetics.
Oh,
Apologetics.
AI is gonna govern us in hell.
Oh, is
I
that
mean,
what
I
he's
can
saying?
see that.
I could totally see that, yeah. This sounds like this is now prophecy. Just referring to how AI is going to govern us in hell. It's impossible to reason with it. Yeah, I feel like that's a valid potentiality. From chance or from nature or from God, that of everything in beginning there was, is, or will be. It's good to have you, pure blood. Hell for some Gnostics was returning to Earth for reincarnation rather than moving up to the pleroma. S. Mill, you need to come to Discord, my friend. I feel like you would be a beautiful addition to the topics. We had talked about Gnosticism a couple weeks ago. Yeah, we are domesticated. I mean, it's true, but I feel like you're saying it as an inherently bad thing, and I just don't know why that would be.
Joe, I'd like to know why domestication is a bad word.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I don't understand. That is what I am not grasping. I mean, the same could be said like in a family unit. Children are domesticated. What is negative about that inherently? You could even go so far.
Domestication is like conforming to a sort of blueprint.
Right, and it's usually got a moral foundation.
Right. The blueprint is in question, not the domestication part. If it's a bad blueprint, being domesticated to it, that's a bad thing. But if it's a good one, then why is that bad?
Right. Right. Yeah, so far I feel like we need more from you, Eric. Because it just sounds like good. If you're talking to a group of Christians who believe that, to say it how Ghosted, if the blueprint is good, then domestication is just adherence to that which is good. So I don't really see like the negative connotation with it. Purposelessness or meaninglessness, where fire doesn't fill its purpose, nor darkness, nor meaning, or purpose equals hell. It's a good way to say it. Hell has a lot of meanings. Are we still doing games? Yes. I did not realize what time it was. So yeah, we'll wrap up here in a second. Okay. Do me a favor, like the video, do all the YouTube stuff because it's very helpful. And that's how we get new people in here to completely derail what was supposed to happen tonight, which was a reading, but have really, really good conversations. Huge fan. So to have more of that, like the video, share it to all your super good friends who want to listen to heretics, and then join Discord. And that's the most important part. There's a link to the Discord pinned to the top of the live chat. There's a link in the description of all the videos. We do streams on 2 different YouTube channels. Some of the stuff we talked about tonight, I've recently done things on my other YouTube channel. So that's at Tattooed Theist. That's the same thing on all social media. Most important thing outside of the things we talked about that I've recently done, the most important thing is the live stream that we do over there. So that's every Tuesday night. We did Marcion last week. We did the Gnostic perspective the week before. But it's just random topics that everybody votes on in Discord. I post a poll every week in Discord. Everybody votes on the poll, and whatever wins the poll is what we talk about on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, we do live streams on this YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you're new, do it if this was entertaining. But sometimes we actually have to read everything. We talk about everything. We read everything. On Sunday, we read the canon. On Thursday, we're reading the, what are we reading right now? The Book of Giants. And then on Saturday, we'll continue reading the Gospel of Truth, unless we get extremely diverted into conversation like this. On Discord, there's an events page where you can see all of that. So the YouTube channel that it's on, what the discussion is on, whether it's the canon, extra canonical, apocryphal, or like this one is also non-canonical, but also not a part of the apocrypha because this is a Gnostic text, obviously. But the type of things we've talked about are the type of things that we talk about and the type of things that I rant about on social media. So if you're into this sort of thing, definitely join Discord if nothing else, and then follow the rest of the stuff wherever it may be that you use social media. And in a minute, I'm going to close because we're playing games. So we are doing game night tonight in Discord. So as soon as I close this out, I'm going to open the voice channel in the academic corner, and we will do some brief games because it's been fun. Dumb instigated. I feel like that's the closing comment. I feel bad for cutting this off. There are good conversations going. If you guys want to keep the conversation going, go to Discord and throw it in off topic because I'm going to close this out in 30 seconds. But this stuff is interesting. We do cover what is made up. Yes. We will cover some of what was made up on Tuesday. I have no idea what you were actually referring to, but I'm going to assume you're talking about things that were made up in Christian history, and we will do that on Tuesday. It's a pastime of mine. Makes me incredibly depressed, but also feel good at the same time. Sanctification is domestication. 10 seconds, I'm closing the YouTube, y'all. If you would like to continue, go to Discord. Light up the off topic. I worked for a CNN producer at the FAA for a bit, and he told us we were working for his mansion and his wife's porch in Potomac, MD, down the street from Dan Snyder, owner of the Redskins. What is happening? Tired of the planet you were made up. Tired of liars. Come hang out in Discord. We can, I would like to get in on this. I slowly caught up as we got closer to being done. All right, Patricia, are you playing games? Is it the 4 of us, or do we have more?
Yes.
Okay. All right, y'all. I'm closing YouTube. We're done. Love you guys. Have a good night. Join Discord, and then we'll see you tomorrow night on this same YouTube channel at 6 p.m. Central Time for the Book of Job. Some traditional old canonical stuff. YouTube out. Have a good night.